Please listen carefully.
So before we start this episode, I just wanted to throw out a comment, a disclaimer, if you will. We may say some things that will, possibly offend some. We don't want to lose half of our audience here.
We're not talking about like cursing or something like that.
No.
We keep it classy here.
Very classy. But I think it's just important that we start this and you all understand that there's going to be some opinions put out here. And that's just because they're personal preferences.
Yeah.
Not putting it out there. So
yeah. I mean, the whole point here, I think, for this podcast is, we want to discuss actual bases, right? Which are near and dear to everyone's heart, right? They have something they really care about very deeply. It's the instrument that's like almost attached to your body,
right?
For everything you do.
Yeah.
But there's a wrinkle to this, right? Which is, you need to apply what you hear here to your auditions, your shows, whatever your recording sessions are,
right?
And do the right thing for the gig, right? Like, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of 4-string versus extended range basses.
Yep.
And it's really all about what's right for what your gig is, right? You don't show up to like a show with like a vintage or indie rock with some super modern 5 or 6 string active bass with lights and doodads on it or whatever. And by the same token, if you're trying to go do a modern R&B gig,
yep,
and you may have some issues, right, with that. You may not be able to cover every part that's expected.
That's right.
So, think about that and apply what you hear here. I think that's
that's what we're trying to put out here.
Yeah, that's the lesson. So I'm Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
And welcome to Practical Bass, where each week we take a topic of interest to you, the working bass player, and we unpack that and explore it. We also love to hear feedback from you, the listeners. So you can find us easily on the web via practicalbass.com, but you can also find us via Facebook, Google+, Twitter, even Instagram, and we welcome your feedback. We really love to hear from you, our listeners. Please talk to us about what you hear here. Give us your reaction to the opinions you hear. Give us your ideas for future shows even. We would love to hear those as well. You can subscribe to this podcast if you're not already. We hope you are subscribed. And if you're not, you can find us via the Apple Podcasts app on your iPhone, or via iTunes. You can also find us on Google Play Music on your Android phone or your computer, or Stitcher Radio, which works across platforms. Whichever one you choose, simply search for Practical Bass, and you'll find our little black and white bass logo, and click subscribe. And that way you will get a new, fresh episode delivered to you each week where we talk about these topics. And I hope that you enjoy the topic we're going to talk about today, which is 4-string versus extended range basses. Dave, what do you play?
Well, I'm going to bore you. I play 4-string.
It's never boring with you, Dave.
It's just 4.
You make 4 sound like many.
I'm a 4-string. That's more or less what I've been playing for the past 20 years plus.
You're a traditionalist. That's cool.
So at one point I did venture into the 5-string range. I found a 5-string. I was playing in a reggae band, and I thought it's a good time for me to get that low B. And found on Craigslist a Mexican jazz 5-string for like next to nothing.
That just seems like that ought to be a song. Like, I found a 5-string Mexican jazz. I don't know.
It is going to be a song. Now it is.
Now.
That was the song right there. It's going to be big. So
that's a hit in the making.
Yes, and it was a funny episode because it was one of those like Craigslist things where, guys giving it away for dirt cheap. I've got to drive like 45 minutes away, but Friday at like 8 p.m. So I'm like, okay, I'll do this. He gives me an address, but the address is actually like a bar, and he's playing And then I realize it's the bassist that's selling it to me.
Yeah.
I got to wait for their set break. So he like lured me to go see his gig
With a low-priced bass.
with a low price.
That's when you really are serious about getting an audience.
Literally paying his, and I got there. Hopefully he's not listening. He doesn't know. He didn't remember me. So I had to wait to the set break. And then because parking was really bad, it was, in a city. So he had to take me to a parking garage. So I didn't even get to like test the thing out because I can't plug it in.
Yeah.
Just look at it. And I knocked him down $50. I was like, I'm not like, I'm just taking a gamble here.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was my one experience, and I had it for I owned that bass for 2 months and 4 gigs, and then went right back to my 4.
Yeah. It just wasn't your bag.
No, not really.
Yeah.
But what about you? Well, Paul, I know what you play, but for our listeners out there, what do you ride?
Well, I'm normally a 5-string player actually nowadays. I mean, I've got 4s, I've got 5s, and I think nowadays I kind of tend to the 5-string, and my 5 is like most of them, it's tuned down to a low B. I know there are some 5 strings that people will string from E up to low E up to high C,
right?
Which is also cool. I don't have any of my basses tuned that way. I'm more of the foundational player, I guess. So the low B works for me. And I used to have a 6-string, but it was too big for my hands, and it was kind of a stupid purchase. So I got rid of it a few years back when I got on a kind of a trading kick.
Right. Yeah. So what do you like? What do you like about your 5-string?
Well, so I guess one thing that I think about is a 5-string isn't automatically better than a 4, right? The sound of the bass is everything, right? You can have a crappy sounding 5-string and a great sounding 4-string, and I would much rather play the 4-string at that point.
Sure.
But for me, what I like in the 5 is just that range. Having that range is useful. I don't ride on those low notes a lot. That's kind of, to me, the number one rule of playing a 5-string or more, or an extended range bass is don't overuse it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Think about the fact that you're there for the same reason as somebody who's got a 4-string.
Yep.
So don't get crazy.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the low notes on that B string, they're like seasoning, right? If you add enough flavor, makes the dish that much better. Like you can just take it to the next level, but you put in too much and it's just it ruins the dish.
Yep.
Right?
That makes sense. Yeah.
So the B string for me gives me a way to play in a lower register, but higher up the neck, right? For me, that's the big selling point for a 5-string. I mentioned my 6 that I used to have was too big for my hands.
Right.
Like the neck was just trying to navigate it was difficult.
Yeah.
There are, since that time, I've run into other 6 strings that have narrower spacing that are not quite as difficult to navigate. But, even so, it's, there are problems inherent in that as well, right?
Yeah.
Or challenges, I guess I should say. So for me, the real key of having that low B string is that I can play higher up the neck. Like I can play that low E, up at fret 5 instead of at the bottom. And, the spacing is closer together there, which means my hand can be more relaxed.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that I'll always play that either, because sometimes, having the low E on an open string gives you a timbre that you want.
Yep.
Right.
That's right.
So it's just having an option. For me, that's that option is what makes it worthwhile.
Right.
It's really all about, the neck size, the profile for the neck, and how well I can navigate around it.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, why 4-string for you?
Well, I think, one of my themes overall, like with my gear and everything, but specifically the bass is, I go for a lighter. I just think about the playing a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I think about the weight of my shoulder.
For sure.
And it'll hurt. So I know that sounds like super. Maybe I just need to go to the gym. I do everything. I
Work out once in a while, why don't you?
I do buy a $10 a month membership so that I can get a gym tag on my keychain. It's just for the tag.
Just to look like, oh yeah, I belong to that gym.
I don't even want to go back because I know they're going to be like, oh my gosh, they're going to see a photo of me when I scan that tag, and they're going to, I know the technology, it'll say last time here, 2014 or something. No, I'll just keep paying for the tag. Thank you. No, I think for me, a lot of what I like about having a 4-string is that it's lighter on my shoulder. I can also, I just feel, and I don't know, maybe this is just in my mind, maybe I have issues, but I feel like if I have to, I can manhandle a 4-string.
Yeah.
Like I could take it down if the song goes there and it gets a little aggressive.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Like I'm in there. I can own it. I think another piece is, what I like about it is just that I'm comfortable with it. Like,
right.
There are just habits we get into.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, it's always been here. I can make it, and so I've changed my style of playing over the years to accommodate that. So I'm, I don't know what the right term is, but it's like, I'm a shifter, I shift my hand position.
Yeah.
And I've come to really like incorporate that into my style. Yeah. So it's like feeding itself, so I'm stylistically, that's like a sound that I've learned to enjoy, from what I put out. And that's kind of like my thing. So, I always think about like that, on the A string, sliding from like a D to an E versus like dropping down a string.
Yeah.
There's something different about that tone.
Oh, absolutely.
And that difference is like, if I've incorporated that into my sound.
Yeah. And I mean, that counts for, you can play that same interval in a few places on the bass, right? And each one of them has their own timbre.
Right.
They're not always going to match the tone that you have in your head that you're trying to achieve for that song.
Right.
Or for that part. Yeah. That makes good sense. And you mentioned this comfort level, and it's funny because I was thinking about, as you said that, I was thinking about, my comfort level with a 5-string. And that sort of made me, I think in town, like I'm kind of known as like, I'm the guy who plays a 5-string at most things, which is weird to me because I'm like, I never aimed to be that. It was just, I happen to have, like, it's like having that kind of hammer. Oh, that's the guy who's got he's got that one particular electric drill or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we become comfortable with those pieces. Yeah. And part of that comfort also, like there's a give and take, so there are pieces of that I know that, that are challenges for me with the 4-string. Like there's, that B string does have its own like tone. It has something in there. It's like milky and just, it sits really well. And I just, as to what you were saying earlier, how like you like to have the options, I literally don't have that option. Just not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's tough. And also there are, sometimes you're looking stylistically, or, if you're covering a song, there are some bass lines that really do call for a 5-string. I mean, out of tone and out of like the mapping of the way that the chord progression or the line is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can get there by, maybe by tuning a 4-string down.
Right.
But then there are particular issues with that, like how far you can tune down before the strings start, kind of flapping around a little too much.
Yep. Gets a little loose.
Yeah. And there are ways to compensate for that where you increase the gauge of the string. But then again, now you're changing another physical part of the bass that maybe doesn't agree with you the way you like to play.
Right. Right. So with your 5-string, what do you like? Are there disadvantages? What do you see as a disadvantages?
Yeah, there can be disadvantages. I mean, the 5-string, pretty much de facto is going to have a wider neck, right?
Right.
The place where it maybe doesn't come out so maybe so drastically, like that difference doesn't come out so drastically, is the vintage precision neck, right? If you have a vintage style P from, either a replica or an original, God, if you have an original and, you're listening to this podcast, God bless you, that those are, you're obviously well healed, and we salute you, sir or madam. But if you have one of those, vintage P-necks from the late 50s, early 60s, right? I always call those the baseball bat neck, right? Because it's like a low radius, it's like a C profile, and like it's like a baseball bat, and you having that chunk can be great because, you play differently. It's almost like you're strangling the neck sometimes. Like, it works great for like aggressive or, even like vintage where you're just like digging in, just meat and potatoes digging in, right? Getting all the funk out of it.
Yeah.
But, the other than those, there's usually going to be a wider neck on a 5-string. But also it's not amazingly wider, right? The spacing between the strings is going to be a little narrower, right? Most 5 strings that you run into are going to be like jazz style basses or jazz style necks.
Right.
I have seen 5-string, P basses. Obviously there's a lot of other types of basses out there as well. These are not the only types there are.
Right.
There's modern 5 strings of different varieties.
Yep.
The string spacing is going to be different on those. And those differences mean you have to be careful about how you dig in,
right?
Versus a 4-string. Like if I pull out my, 4-string precision bass, there's a way that I can dig in with that bass because of the string spacing that is very different than how I treat any of my 5 strings, which are more like, most of them are jazz style and like a jazz spacing. So it changes the way you play. And finally, like, it only occurred to me, I think, like in the few minutes before we got on here, the de facto, like this is the simplest possible difference, and yet so important. The strings are more expensive, right? I mean, immediately your 5-string set is going to be more expensive. Why? Because the single biggest piece of metal is like, I mean, it's that 5th string, and you're adding that. So like, your strings are going from, $18, $19, $20, $21 or whatever to like immediately they're like 25, 30 or more dollars. So, just expect that. That's not as much fun.
Yeah. That's a practicality right there.
Right. For sure. The pocketbook.
Exactly. What about, I'm curious because I know that you play a lot of different styles. So how, like, where does the number of strings play into, different styles? And
well, we both play a lot of different styles. I think, the style where, I will bring my 5-string out is if I'm doing a gig, and by gig, I mean anything, it's a session or whatever it is. If it's something on the more modern side, if it's like R&B, fusion, if it's, progressive, hard rock, pop, whatever, any of those, I will typically bring my 5-string. And it doesn't mean that, I never use my 5-string if it's outside those genres. It's just, it becomes something that I'll think about. If it's something where I'm going in the first time with some guys, I don't know what we're going to be doing. It's maybe it's a jam session or like, feel it out or whatever. Automatically, I'll just take my 5 because, essentially it's like 4 + 1.
You get your options.
Yeah. I mean, I remember there is a story about a guy who he used to play bass for Prince, and Prince was a stickler about, 4 strings, like 4 strings. That's all Larry Graham ever needed. Like he would literally just tell guys that.
Right.
Larry Graham only needed 4 strings.
Right.
And so this guy finally said to Prince, he's like, yeah, I have those 4 strings. I have those same 4 strings right here. I just have another one extra. And I think he won the argument. I mean, like, I think that won. I'm not sure, but I guess that went down because I've seen other people play in 5s with Prince since that. So apparently that worked.
That's right.
That was the right answer. He had the right answer. But yeah, if it's anything, like if I'm trying to do something that's, I don't know, pre-1980s or something like that. If it's vintage or indie or old school, I am definitely going to take a 4-string, right? Because
Yeah.
The parts, like you're not going to hear a lot of extended range keyboard based bass in
Yeah.
those older recordings or older covers.
Yeah.
And if the band is doing originals and they're trying to write in that vibe, like I want to accompany their vibe. Like I want to be part of that.
Yeah.
And that means I'm not going to come in there, bring a 5-string and like suddenly have there's this ultra low, note that comes out. It's like, oh, it might sound good, but it kind of it's like violating the rules almost a little bit. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I like to meet the expectations of, what that band is trying to do. So if it's anything old school, right, I would take my 4 for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. There's that comfort level for me, right? So that I think falls into like, it eventually becomes a stubbornness for me as a 4-string player. And it prohibits me from switching, from even like testing it out, like almost as if like, you know what, I tried it, I'm good. I do the 4, that's me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of 4-string players are like that. Like we're just this like group of bassists that just say, nah, I'm good. I'm good with 4.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
And I definitely went that way. Like, that 6-string that I used to have, when I sold that, I was like, never again. And I started playing at that point. I mean, for several years, I would just play 4 strings, even though I had, a couple 5-string basses. I just got really into that traditional stance and, really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I think it kind of made me make choices that were good choices for what I was doing, but also, I don't know, kind of by reducing the options, it made me more cognizant of cliches or crutches in my playing.
Right.
And then instead of thinking, oh, I've always got this other string down here, well, that string's not there anymore. So I had to think more about where I was shifting and things like that.
That's right. So, and which is cool because like what I see in your playing is like you're a bassist who's like switched in different roles. What would you say to me, right, as a 4-string player, if I gave you the opportunity to like open me up and say, you know what, here it is, here's my one shot at getting you to be a 5-string, like to buying that one 5-string bass and working with it. What advice would you give me, or what line would you give me?
Yeah. Oh, you put a huge demand on me. Now I have to have to be a salesman for the 5-string.
No, now, you represent 5-string sales.
All 5-string players are like, they're going to hang on. They're like, how are you going to do this?
You better not drop it.
They're going to be like, wrong. Drop the ball. Well, I mean, like I said before, it's an option, right?
Yeah.
It's like a sunroof on a car. You don't open your sunroof every day,
right?
Because sometimes it's raining, and you don't want to do that. That's common sense. But when you want to feel that sun coming in, having that sunroof is kind of nice. It really is. I think the 5-string for me, like unlocking what the 5-string should be used for, right?
Yeah.
Versus what some people will use it for by default, right?
Yeah.
Some people will use it. Oh, anytime I play in the key of D or whatever,
right,
or C sharp or whatever, or C, I'm going to go down and play on this low note. To me, that is exactly the wrong way to approach it.
Right.
It's the lowest string is it's there for you to add flavor, right? If you think about the bass in terms of like intervals and patterns, then I find it's much easier to switch to a 5-string, right? If you know that, hey, I'm coming down to the adjacent string, so, I'm a 4th under, or another way to think about it is that might be from the root down to the 5 below it, right? If you think in those terms, 5-string is really easy to deal with. You have to get past the reflex in your head that says this bottom string that I'm about to play is an E, versus, oh, no, it's not now, it is a B. Right. And that's the thing, even to this day, like I readily admit, like if I take a 4-string to a gig along with a 5-string, I do have to have a little bit of conscious thought about it and make sure that I don't, go back to a physical reflex of playing a certain string. If I do that, guaranteed I will screw up because
Yep.
suddenly like, oh, I'm a fourth up from everybody else in the band.
Right.
Not a good place to be when you're playing bass. You don't want to do that. That's just a ground rule. Be in the same key as the other people in the band.
I mean, if you keep doing it, maybe it's art.
No, it's jazz. I
Oh,
did it 3 times. It's jazz now. I think bandmates would disagree.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So yeah, I mean, selling the 5 is like it is like selling an option on a car.
Yeah.
It is an option, right? It gives you more places to go. I feel like it would be easier for me to sell a 5 to somebody who has kind of smaller hands, ironically,
Yeah.
right? Because if it's a well-designed 5-string,
Yep.
being able to play that lower register further up the neck
Yep.
can make things a little easier.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about your 4? So sell me on, I got to go like Paul, you got to go the traditional route. I really want you to
Yeah.
get back to your roots.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, listen, Jocko did it with 4. Actually,
It's true.
yeah, that doesn't work at all because we're not Jocko.
And he wasn't like 5 strings kind of took over after his time though, right? Like they weren't, I mean, I'm sure they must have existed maybe, but maybe not they weren't nearly as prevalent as they are now.
Right. But,
I wonder if he would have switched.
yeah, well, I mean, he took the frets off his fretboard. So,
He was an experimental dude.
I mean, why didn't he just go for the 5th?
Maybe he had to find somebody to make a bridge.
That's right. It took too much work.
Yeah, that is a lot of work.
Now, I'm going to redo that sales pitch. I mean, 4's plenty, right? That's all you need.
Yeah. It's like, those are the same, it's all Larry Graham needed.
That's right. It's
Just
all
ask
there.
Prince.
You just needed 4.
It's true.
You know,
4 is good.
Like if it's not 4, then I guess is it like so it's going to be 5 or should it be 6?
Uh-oh.
So
more.
I don't know where do we go?
7.
Like before we even think about not doing the 4, like where are we with the 6, right? And plus, and then there's 7s.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, crazy extended range basses out
Yeah.
there now. Like, yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, I used to have a 6-string bass. I described that earlier, and I'm not even sure to this day why I bought it. It was too big for my hands. I could play it, right? And the interesting thing was I bought it, and I actually gigged with it that night.
right.
That was my challenge. I took it home, practiced
Wow.
for 2 or 3 hours just to get the difference under my fingers,
Hmm.
and I took it to a gig. I could play it, but it literally was uncomfortable to play. I at the time I sold it, right, some years back, I think about 4 years ago, I sold it.
Yeah.
And it sat in a closet for years before that.
Yeah.
I just didn't take it out. I developed into the kind of player who knew the difference. Like I knew the right instrument for me. When I bought that thing, I wasn't old enough or experienced enough to know what the right bass was.
Right.
Right. I knew that this particular instrument was beautiful. It was like this transparent black finish, which made it look like purple almost.
Right.
Gold hardware. Gorgeous instrument. And it sounded quite good.
Yeah.
Because I did take it out and play it a bit before I sold it. And I was like, yeah, selling it's the right choice. Because I was like, I don't like playing this.
Right.
And I remembered why it sat in the closet for years, because I learned what the difference was and that this was not a bass for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So instead of just struggling with it, I got rid of it. I think extended range basses they're interesting. I mean, certainly the luthiery that goes into them is phenomenal in some cases.
Yeah.
And they have their place, right? You see players who can play some amazing. There are things you can do with those basses that you cannot do with a 4-string. Granted,
Yeah.
right? But they're almost specialized to the point that you have to have the right kind of gig for the bass to even make sense.
Right.
And is that where you want to put your bass money? I mean, do you want to put your gear money into that?
Right.
Like, I'm going to sink a bunch of money into this very expensive extended range bass, but it's only going to work at like this one particular gig or, this side thing or whatever.
Yep.
And, I'm not going to lie. These basses are kind of fetishized quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen players who use them as an affectation. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, look what I've got. I've got this 7-string bass or this 8-string bass. And they're
Right.
buying it because and they do what I did when I was young or inexperienced or whatever, which was, buy this bass that looked beautiful,
Yeah.
had a bunch of strings. I was like, more strings. How could that not be better? Right.
Yeah.
But players who use them as an affectation and caring more about the fact that they have or they play this, wild extended range bass as opposed to doing the job of the bass player,
Right.
Being the musical foundation. To me, that's the wrong direction. Now, again, it doesn't mean no one should have extended range basses, right? Because they're players or gigs or whatever that makes sense. A guy who's doing like his whole gig is like being a solo bass player or something like that, where the range gives him all the options he needs as a single player, or he's playing in a specific kind of combo, combo of players where that is like, that's their thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense. Right.
Right.
But I still think about the idea of some guy who shows up to like this vintage, like a vintage vibe band, or, shows up in like a country band or something like that and pulls out like a 7-string bass.
Yeah.
Like if I'm a musician in that band and I see you do that, I'm going to laugh. Like I'm going to be like, you're auditioning for the wrong group, my friend. Like
You got the wrong email.
Yeah, you got the wrong email. Yeah, for sure. Like, and that guy might be a great player, but immediately like you've set off an alarm bell.
Yeah.
Where people like, what is this guy? And then you have to kind of come back from that.
Right.
Right. You might be the kind of player who, you're gonna show up and you're gonna do the exact right work. But but immediately, like, do you even want to set off that flag before note 1?
Right. It's already a tough job.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's not just the audience that you're, performing to, but you have your bandmates.
Yeah.
Right. Do you want to like put them off? And you could come, with like one of the like the Chapman sticks.
Oh yeah.
And honest, I mean, I've some of those guys that do that is like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it either like typically in duos or solos, right? And it does its thing. But at what point are you just completely bringing a different in? Like, at what point do you escape that you're not even playing bass anymore? You know, it's a different thing.
Yeah. Or are you fitting into that band at this point? Or, are you kind of dragging it off target? And I have a Chapman stick as well. I used to play it quite often. I haven't, as recently just been concentrating on bass, but it's a very interesting instrument. And like a lot of these other extended range instruments, like there's a place for it. But if you think that you're going to bring it into, every gig and it's just going to, you're just going to make it work for whatever you're doing, I think you're mistaken, right? You bring that into the right kind of gig, or maybe even it's something you bring that you just haul out for a song or two because you have a certain band and you want to cover a song a certain way.
Yeah,
but it's the same way. Yeah,
one of my first bass that I picked up, and I didn't even realize, like, I mean, I knew I was playing bass, right? But I didn't give it much thought. But it was a fretless bass, and I just played that for years.
Yeah,
until I realized, like, in a band setting, like, this is so. It's just it's like it's niche. It has its own sound, and you can't just apply it to wherever you want to apply it to.
Right. Like, is that working for the gig that you're on?
Right.
It's really all about that. There's one other aspect to this that we didn't talk about, which is, manipulating the sound of your bass with electronics, right? Different pedals, whatever it is that you're, whatever rig that you're running through. And, obviously there are ways to do that. Like you got a new toy that you showed me today. Yeah.
Yeah. I picked up a Pog, which is like it's a synth, it's a synth effect, but it's in essence, it's just a different type of octave, pedal. And and it's funny that you say that, because I was thinking about when I was messing around with all the dials, and I was thinking about this episode. So I I threw out, I was like, well, let me just do a sub, like one level sub,
Right.
and see what that does. And, yeah, I could get those lower notes out of it, right? Like there's an alternate way to get there.
Yeah.
It's not like having a B string,
Right.
but it's a way of, if that's something that you need, you can grab it.
Right. Yeah. If the point is just that you need to get, like, I need to get a little lower than where I'm getting now. Like if I could get an octave lower,
Right.
That might be
because some songs actually need, like, just below the E.
right.
They need
right.
that E flat for whatever reason.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, there are other ways to get there. The extended range bass is not, I mean, it's not the only game in town. If you need to get down to that E flat or D or whatever, we talked about tuning, we talked about, these pedals. So there are other ways to do it. I would say not a requirement. I would, as a musician, I would much prefer to be the guy who walks in with a 4-string and plays tastefully for the music that we're doing. Like, it fits in really well, than be the guy who shows up with a 5-string and he can hit this low D or this low C or whatever, but God, he like camps out there the whole time. And, the whole band sounds like, we're kind of veering into, we sound too metal.
Right.
We're trying to do like singer-songwriter, like, pretty folk stuff. And this guy's like down in like the low, like detune, like Tool register with his bass or something. So yeah, again, it really is just about doing the things that are right for the gig.
Yeah, and what works for you as a bassist, sometimes you can, if that's, if you can pull the 4-string on everything, if that's your thing, go for it.
Yeah, yeah, and if not, fives are an option, and I don't think we're trying to dissuade anybody from exploring.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good place to wrap up for this week. This has been another episode of Practical Bass, where we take a topic of interest to you, the working bass player, and explore that. We would love to hear your thoughts on 4-string versus 5-string or other extended range basses. If you want to get in touch with us and talk to us about this, you can get on our Facebook page. You can also reach us on Twitter or Google Plus or Instagram. You can also send us feedback on our website, which is practicalbass.com. If you are not subscribed to this podcast and you're listening, we would love to have you subscribe. It's very easy to do. You can, again, visit the website at practicalbass.com, or you can go to the podcasts app on your iPhone. You can use iTunes on your Mac computer. You can visit Google Play Music on any computer, or you can use Stitcher Radio, which will work on any platform. Simply search for Practical Bass on the app that you're using and then click on subscribe, and you'll get a new fresh copy of Practical Bass with a new episode and a new topic coming to you every week. And we hope to hear back from you soon. And until then, we hope that you are able to elevate your gigs, elevate your gear, and have a great time playing. I'm Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
And this has been Practical Bass.
Thanks for listening.
Marcus Motherfucking Miller.
That's pretty cool.
It was pretty cool.
It would have been really good if you were like, that one bass line that you do, where it's like, like, you know like, which one I'm talking about, right?
And like, yeah, I know. It's like super uncomfortable.
Or ask him like, can you teach that to me on the plane?
Yo, Marcus. Yo, Marcus. Can you teach me how to slap on the bass? It's like security. Security.